This is RAIN Hamcast Podcast number 85, posted February 4th, 2023, voiced by Will Rogers, K5WLR. The 1990s had its share of controversy in amateur radio. Even RAIN Report columnist Mark Thompson, WB9QZB, jumped into the fray periodically in his RAIN commentaries. In this edition of the RAIN Hamcast Podcast, we'll take you back to 1994 to relive 2 Bytes From QZB commentaries.
Hello, this is Mark, WB9QZB, with another Bytes From QZB entitled Ham Radio, a middle-aged white man's hobby. A couple years ago, I spent Thanksgiving week in Naples, Florida, at a friend's house. For those of you who aren't familiar with Naples, it's a city south of Fort Myers and has a reasonably wealthy population. On the Monday of Thanksgiving week, Naples has a tradition where they have a lighting festival, and they turn on thousands of little white Christmas lights for the holiday season. During the festival, all the shops are open, there are food vendors in the street, and bands playing. While walking around Naples with my wife and friend, I got a strange feeling. At first I couldn't put my finger on it, and then it came to me. Out of the hundreds of people I had passed in the street, I hadn't noticed any minorities. That's right, everybody was white. Even the clerks at the stores were white. We then started looking for a minority. We couldn't see one, and we never did that night. Does that make Naples racist? No, but it does mean that for whatever reason, the community only attracts white people. I've had this same feeling at Ham Radio Hamfest and club meetings, except it's even more exclusive. Ham radio in this day and age seems to be predominantly comprised of middle-aged white men. Not only don't I see minorities, I usually don't even see women or younger people. Why is this occurring? Does it mean we're racist or bigots? Maybe male chauvinists? Homophobic? I'm not exactly sure why ham radio has evolved into being a hobby for middle-aged white men. However, it's probably always been this way. But the real question is, what are we doing to change it? The country is made up of peoples from many different lands. Contrary to what some try to tell us, our diversity is not our strength. What makes us strong as a country is our common culture and common language. This is why we don't have the tribalistic wars as are going on in Africa and Eastern Europe currently. When a country segregates its minorities and puts them into the victim role, it divides people, not unites them. The same thing is true in ham radio. What makes us good ham operators is what we do to contribute to the service, such as public service and emergency events, advancing technology, building goodwill, and many other ways. Being divisive on the air does not build ham radio's reputation, but instead diminishes it. While we should be able to discuss serious and controversial issues on the air, name-calling and labeling people is not helpful to the service. For example, the events on 14.313 MHz are self-destructive. The American Radio Relay League's refusal to accept an ad from a gay and lesbian organization, Lambda, is stupid and narrow-sighted. The harassing of a repeater organization by a couple individuals and then a court order banning them from the repeater is bad for public relations. We have something in ham radio that most groups don't have. We have several ways to communicate and build strength and unity in our service. If we as hams demonstrate openness and tolerance of differing views and opinions, and if we see people in terms of how they behave instead of as who we think they are, then ham radio will attract all types of people. But if we let issues divide us, we're going to be looked upon as a bunch of old, closed-minded, intolerant white men. Remember, it isn't the color of someone's skin, their sex, their sexual persuasion, or their religion that makes them good or bad ham radio operators. It's what they contribute to the hobby, and their on-the-air operating practices that make them good hams. Let's not forget this as we continue to broaden the appeal and base of ham radio to everyone. Thanks for listening. 73. This has been Mark, WB9QZB, for RAIN.
we'll bring you a second controversial commentary from Mark Thompson, WB9QZB, after a station break. This is RAIN Hamcast Podcast number 85 for February 4th, 2023. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. We'll be right back.
Hello, this is Mark, WB9QZB, with some Bytes from QZB, entitled Your No-Code Accent. First, I'd like to start this editorial by saying that I have been and continue to be one of the largest supporters of the no-code license. This license has been responsible for the significant growth of ham radio in the last couple of years. Of course, we've all heard the objections to the no-code license. But let's take a look at a different perspective. How has the no-code licensee operated on the air? The reason I bring this up is that although I don't regularly use any repeaters, I do on occasion listen to 2-meter repeaters. What I've heard recently is somewhat disconcerting. While I don't want to stereotype, the first thing that tips you off to a no-coder is that they have a 1x3 call sign, such as N9XXX. Although in some districts, they have exhausted this block and are now issuing 2x3 call signs, such as KB9XXX. Many of them are familiar with using two-way radios, such as CBs, and don't seem to have any fear of talking on the radio. This is where the problem begins. It is both what they're talking about and how they're talking about it. For example, in a recent conversation, a no-coder, when asked his name, indicated that his personal was such and such. What's a personal? This is directly from CB radio. No different than if he'd said breaker 19. Another no-coder asked how long the other ham had been out here. Yet another CB term. But the worst example was a few weeks ago when I was listening to a wide area coverage repeater in southeastern Wisconsin. 3 no-coders were chatting. One of them had his license for only a day and had a new Radio Shack HT. He asked the others how he sounded, and of course they said great. In fact, one of them said that his signal was excellent, since his S-meter on his radio was at 10/9. Mind you now, they're using a repeater here. The problem was that the new ham's audio was really very low and almost couldn't be heard, but no one said anything about it. Well, this went on for a while, and finally I couldn't contain myself. I broke in politely and indicated to the one-day ham that while his signal into the repeater was okay, his audio was very low, and that he should either talk closer to the mic or adjust his mic gain. He didn't really want to believe me, nor did the other 2 no-coders, until another ham with 30 years of experience in the hobby also broke in and agreed with me. The question is, what's wrong with this picture? Let's start with something the American Radio Relay League, ARRL, used to call our novice accent. Many years ago, the ARRL published articles about the novice accent. The articles dealt with the fact that as new hams, novices need to learn to be good hams and follow established procedure and decorum. I call these recent events with no-coders our no-code accent. There are 2 problems I see developing. First is that hams with a lot of experience are not given the advice and guidance needed by new hams. We need to help them get their equipment in good working order, with on-the-air signal reports and technical advice. They need guidance from us. We need to tell them what's acceptable on ham radio and what isn't. We need to invite them to join us in ham radio events and become a complete part of the ham fraternity. The second problem is with the no-coder. The no-coder needs to accept established procedure on ham radio. He needs to realize that although he may be comfortable talking on a radio because of his CB experience, he may have picked up some bad habits that he is going to need to shake. More importantly, he needs to accept and ask for advice from more experienced hams. Another aspect to this whole discussion is that there is more to ham radio than just buying a 2-meter HT and yakking on the repeater. One could learn code and use the HF bands. Or better yet, the no-coder could begin using our VHF and UHF bands using modes such as single sideband, CW, fast-scan TV, satellites, packet, and so forth. They could get on 6 meters, 222, 432, or 1.2 gigahertz. Ham radio is to have fun with, and also to experiment with. There is more to do on ham radio than most of us have the time for, but we need to continue to explore new horizons. In addition, there is much public service and emergency communications that we can also become involved in. So I encourage new hams to pay attention to all of what ham radio has to offer and take the advice of hams with many years of experience. More importantly, it is incumbent on all of us, new and old alike, to welcome the new ham and give the guidance they need. If they develop bad operating habits, we only have ourselves to blame for not nipping it in the bud early on. These are Bytes from QZB, from Mark Thompson, WB9QZB, for RAIN.
That's a wrap on RAIN Hamcast Podcast number 85 for February 4th, 2023. We rewound to 1994 to hear two examples of some of the controversy that swirled during that decade in amateur radio, as voiced by Mark Thompson, WB9QZB, in his Bytes from QZB commentaries. The next RAIN Hamcast Podcast, number 86, will post February 18th, 2023. RAIN founder Hap Holly, KC9RP, edits and produces this bi-weekly ham radio hamcast without monetization. Your support via PayPal and feedback on the rainreport.com are appreciated. Copyright 1985, 2023, RAIN, the Radio Amateur Information Network. All rights reserved. RAIN programming is made available under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. You are encouraged to download, share, host, and transmit the RAIN Hamcast in its entirety via amateur radio. Thanks to Tom Shimizu, N9JDI, for posting a not-for-broadcast version of these podcasts via the RAIN Report channel on YouTube. Very 73 from RAIN. Keep on hamming.